This episode is brought to you by Progressive.
Are you driving your car or doing the laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too.
Having these two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive save over $775 on average.
Quote a home and car bundle today at progressive.com.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $779 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2022 and May 2023. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
Welcome to the Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet. This show takes you inside and outside of SharePoint. You'll hear from experts behind the scenes and out in the field. It's all about how SharePoint fits into your everyday work life, with the goal being to share and manage content, knowledge, and applications in order to empower teamwork throughout your organization. I'm Mark Cashman, and I'm here today with my co-host for this episode, Nate Clinton. Nate is from the SharePoint team. Nate, tell us a little bit about what you do.
I am a principal program manager on the SharePoint and OneDrive team, and I lead the mobile efforts for SharePoint. I work with a couple different PMs. Two of them are going to be here today. One is Andy Hayon. He is my manager, and he runs mobile from a broad perspective, and then also runs things like SharePoint Home and communication sites. And then Debjani Mitra is a PM working with me on mobile, and she drives our notification story. So she makes sure that we have the right plans for notifications, both within the mobile team and then also within SharePoint on a whole. And then she also drives additional things like our telemetry story and then also our on-premises plan for 2019.
Today, we also have in our guest segment, we're talking with Mark Rackley and Stephanie Donahue of the Pate Group. Pate Group is a Microsoft-certified consulting firm specializing in long-term collaborative strategy, business process automation, and custom solution development. The thing that I really like about that you'll hear from Mark and Stephanie when we talk with them is the philosophy of how they approach working with their customers. Whether they're on-premises or in the cloud, they have a really nice approach of how to be successful during engagement, but also future-proofing into their customers' future. Because we have Nate, and we're going to be joined by some of Nate's colleagues, we'll talk about mobility and the SharePoint mobile app and a lot of what it offers you. We'll round out the episode by talking about an app and best practice of the week. We'll cover a lot of your frequently asked questions and get answers from a lot of subject matter experts. And then we'll talk about some upcoming conferences and events. So stay tuned. Starting off the episode, here are some interesting news and announcements coming from the SharePoint and OneDrive product groups. First thing up is the ability to embed Power Apps into SharePoint pages and news. Previously, you were able to create a Power App and have it run on your mobile device. So you create it in the Power Apps Designer and you publish it for people to actually have on their phone, for iOS, for Android, for Windows, and treat it like a mobile app. Then we introduced the ability to create Power Apps on the default forms so that when I go to a list or a library and I click New, now I can customize that new form right in line, right in the browser. What this does now with the ability to embed Power Apps into SharePoint pages and news is it gives me the ability to create my Power App in the Power Apps Designer, make choices where I want buttons, colors, what and how I want to connect to external sources. And then I can put it in the context of my page so I can really have that be an embedded experience. This is now going to be released as the new Power Apps web part that's really easy to create your Power App in the Power Apps Designer, drop it on the SharePoint page or in a news article, provide the context, and when you publish it, people will be able to interact with the content and the Power Apps right there together side by side. So super excited to get to this point. People have been waiting for this one since we announced it, and we're really pleased to get that started to roll out. A couple other announcements I want to cover are from the OneDrive team. One of the things they've been working hard on is making a consistent experience when you're doing a number of things when you share or collaborate with other people. And they've been hard at work doing it so that it's consistent across the PC and Mac, and of course across all of the different devices like iOS, Android, and Windows experiences. The first thing I want to focus on is the sharing experience. This has been available certainly in the web and across browsers, across operating systems. And that same experience that you would have had in a PC, now you can have that consistent experience in Mac. And the reason why it brings it into Mac in a much more richer way and more integrated is it's actually a part of the Office 2016 for Mac install, so that now when you install Office 2016 for Mac, you're also installing the latest of the OneDrive client, which is typically used for sync, but now it also brings that new sharing experience. So if I go to a file on my Mac desktop and I click one file and click Share, I will actually see a dialog that's very similar had I done it in the web or if I had been using a PC or I'm switching between the two. Now that same dialog gives me the ability to dictate who I want to share with, what level through the company if I'm sharing externally. I can also choose things like duration of how long I want to share, so I can limit that to 3 days and then it'll expire. And it can also give things like view and edit capabilities simply by clicking edit or not. When I send that out, it's the same experience as if I were to do it from a number of different places. Even inside the Office clients themselves now has a very consistent experience, especially when you think about what is this experience on the Mac. Same experience when you think of iOS and Android. I go to share a file from my OneDrive, and I'll be presented with that same rich sharing experience so that I don't have to relearn how do I do it when I switch my devices. It's now a much more consistent experience. The other things you get when you have Office 2016 for Mac is we more intelligently give you ways to open your file. So it's not always trying to make a call out to the cloud, but if you have a local file, it'll intelligently open. Is this the last place that has the most updated version of the file? And if it is, then you can open that. Of course, that bleeds into the ability to do things offline in a much more rich way. And now especially one big update is if I were to make a change when I'm offline, say I'm on the plane, and I change a PowerPoint, I add a slide, or I update a cell of an Excel file, when you're back online, the only parts of that change that will sync is just the differential, the delta. So instead of resyncing the whole file, which could be a couple megs to maybe even something like 10 or 15 megabyte, now we're just differentiatingly syncing that small K bit or those couple of megabytes, so it'll sync much more quickly. And it also will save certainly on your bandwidth when you start to add this up across your whole company. One other thing that they have that's kind of like making yourself your own admin of your OneDrive experience is the ability to restore based on a point in time, so that if I have a version of a file I was working on that either got corrupted or I just wanted to revert back to something I deleted maybe 2 days ago, but I wanted to recapture that, I can now go and do what they call Files Restore. And it's a really nice user interface. Choose your date, and it'll take you back into that point in time, and then you can recover that file in the state that you remembered it. Or if it were something that were lost or deleted, you at least get that file back in as best a way in when it was last deleted or lost. So the OneDrive team is doing a ton of things, and the biggest focus here in what they've just recently released is that consistency of experience across devices and operating systems, and those capabilities that you expect to be able to self-restore or work with your files when you're syncing them. Last thing that I want to focus on is soon there will be the ability to connect a classic SharePoint team site to a new Office 365 group, which essentially modernizes that team site, and it connects it to all the other group applications like a shared inbox, Planner Plan, a Microsoft Teams instance, and there's that whole value of being able to have an integrated experience across the apps. The important thing is you're using the same team site you've been using for years. It's that classic team site that's going to get a modern look and feel applied to it. You can keep your old classic homepage if you want, or you can take on the new modern homepage if you'd like. But the important thing is that then it connects it to an Office 365 group for the members and how you can then more easily manage who's a part of your group. And then, of course, connecting it to the rest of all those apps that get provisioned. So we're really excited to roll out that ability to take your classic site and move it forward so that there's no site left behind. This week's main topic of the week is really a free-form roundtable discussion to dive into all things mobile, specifically how do we mobilize SharePoint. And now that we've got a few extra people in this studio, I want to welcome you, Andy and Debjani. Thanks for joining us today.
Great to be here.
Thanks, Mark. Good to be here.
From a mobile SharePoint team perspective, what it is that you focus on first, Debjani?
Okay, I work on mobile notifications. Some of you may know we are going to have a mobile feed in the app. So in addition to the various kinds of notifications the app is going to send, I'm working on that feed. And then additionally, I work on some stuff that crosses both web and mobile. One of those things is the bar at the bottom of pages where readers can take actions on a page, like it, comment on it. Soon they'll be saved for later and share as well.
Yeah, and I've always thought of everything you're doing as just that pure engagement, making people aware of what's going on. And then once they find out what's going on, how to provide comments back, feedback, get engaged with their team.
That's a great way to put it.
And Andy, you maybe take a little bit of a broader role than mobile, but share a little bit about your connection to these guys and, of course, the product.
I am the group program manager across a number of experiences for mobile and web. And for me, for SharePoint Mobile, I was one of the early founders of the project. So I've been working with Nate for a long time, Debjani as well. And it's been kind of one of my great passions to be able to develop an app for SharePoint for mobile. And so currently my team looks at a number of experiences across web and mobile, and we try to bring those together in a comprehensive, kind of cohesive manner across the experiences.
So one place that I wanted to start, obviously having all of you here, but really kind of going off what you were just saying, SharePoint Mobile in the past, if I think SharePoint 2010, 2007, anything beyond that, really wasn't very mobile. And we always focused on having a better, improved web experience, but we never had a mobile app. We had some good partners with mobile experiences and their offerings there. We've talked about Jeff Teeper in the past, our corporate vice president on the engineering side for SharePoint, OneDrive, and Office. When you say, you got the project or you started the project for SharePoint mobile app, just describe a little bit about getting those keys, getting the approval to go and, yes, we're going to have an app that we're going to support and maintain for the long duration of going forward. What was that like?
It was a great experience. I've been on SharePoint for about 4 years, and it kind of intersected when Jeff came back to the organization. And for me, I had done a number of experience projects and products and worked across different areas of Microsoft. And so having the opportunity to bring up the experience level in SharePoint and develop things like SharePoint Home and the SharePoint mobile app, it was just a phenomenal experience. Jeff was very supportive. He knew the business so well. And then it felt like an easy pitch when I said, hey, we don't have an app for SharePoint Mobile on iOS, Android, and Windows. And, our customers are using those devices daily, and we need to make them productive where they're working. And it just was an easy pitch. We started with a very small team, and we kind of staffed it out of our existing team, and then we were able to pitch Jeff on both the SharePoint Home web experience and the SharePoint mobile app, and then he helped us get some more resourcing, and off we went.
Awesome. So you got the keys from Jeff, and then you gave the car to Nate.
That's right.
And I don't even know about Nate. Do you even have a driver's license? I always think of you as maybe a little younger than me, but I think you're driving.
I do, and I have a mobile-specific driver's license.
Ooh, I love it. I wouldn't qualify for that. I just take the passenger seat.
Yeah, I don't have one of those.
So, when you got the keys and you got the car and you started taking it out for a drive as far as planning and thinking about it, I know one thing that you always talk about is what are the user jobs? And, of course, thinking about who are the people that are using the app. Can you just walk through when you started to, get that take like, oh, we're going to go this direction to build the app, what you were going to build and how you were going to build it in that context of what can you do with this app and who is it for?
The journey began. We wanted to figure out what the top workloads were for SharePoint and then map those to the mobile experience. So we have things like, getting to your sites and looking for people and searching and, looking at lists and finding your recent files. We wanted to build an experience that took care of all those different pieces. And I think over time, we've evolved a bit in how we think about not only the apps, but the mobile experiences all up. And we wanted to start to pivot a little bit our strategy to more user jobs, as you mentioned. And user jobs for us, there's many different meanings for user jobs, but for us, what are the few things that we think the app can really excel at and be the best at? And that's really our objective. And so we started to think about mobile-specific things that were really specific to the app in a way that SharePoint provides value, and that value can be brought to mobile, but in a way that's different than what you might get from SharePoint proper, SharePoint web. So we looked at 3 different things. The first is search. We think the SharePoint app, and our plan is to make the SharePoint app be the best at search, the best at finding answers. The second one was notifications. Debjani mentioned that. She's driving that effort. We want the app to be the place you go to see all the stuff be notified by all the stuff that's important to you in your SharePoint world. And then finally, consuming content, specifically news. News is a big thing that we're working on. We're really excited about it. And of all the places you can go and consume news, we believe that the SharePoint app can have a user job around news, making it the best place to go and consume that content. So we're continuing to evolve and push the app in that direction. And some of the stuff that you saw at the SharePoint conference really speaks to how we've evolved that strategy and how the design and the makeup of the app is changing to go along with it.
And this is the part where I think of all the teams within the SharePoint team. I want to get a little bit later where we talk about other teams beyond the SharePoint team. But when I think about all those user jobs and all the things you tap into across SharePoint, that means you have to have a good mobile search experience. So you're working closely with the team in Oslo that owns search. But what does that mean from the app? And then everybody that creates the news and pages, the sites, communication sites, working across those teams. To me, the app brings together of what is the art of the possible, but it also means a lot of these teams have to own a lot of work to make their experiences great experiences on mobile. Can you talk a little bit about just working within the immediate teams? And certainly, Debjani, if you're thinking in terms of notifications, there's probably a whole other side of SharePoint I didn't even know about to make sure that just the notification service works properly. But just a little perspective on working across the teams, mostly within SharePoint. We'll get to then across Microsoft in a little bit.
Yeah, I think the SharePoint app is very unique in that sense because it really relies on a whole bunch of different teams to make it pop. You mentioned the team in Norway driving search. We rely on them heavily. We rely on the other teams that Andy drives around SharePoint Home and some of the different ways we go and get recent content. And then notifications, it's a whole nother spectrum of different teams that we rely on even further out from our immediate team, but also kind of within the general area as well. So yeah, we are beholden to many different teams to make our app experiences really be great.
Yeah, and since maybe for me and people listening, that notification service seems like a pretty common thing in today's world. But in SharePoint, with everything that you do with lists, libraries, pages, comments, goes on and on, just a little bit about insight of how those things all come together.
Sure. So the way it works is, we identify what kind of notification would be useful to someone with the app. So say it's a notification for somebody posting a comment on your page, which is a notification that we recently released to production. So right now, if you publish a news post and people comment on it, you get notified, hey, somebody commented on your post. So the way that would work is, look, you identify the team that built the feature, right? And then you go tell them, hey, we want to start sending notifications for it. Can you help us pipe this signal to the notification service? Then that's a whole separate team. So then we work with the notification service team to figure out, are we going to batch these notifications? How frequently do we send them? What's the string of the notification going to be? So you set that up with the notification service team. And then after that, once the notification lands on your phone, you need to have a good user experience for when the user goes and taps on that notification. So that's work on the mobile team side, much more within our control. But there's typically three parts to it. The team that owns the feature from where the signal for the notification comes, the notification service team, and then the client team where we have the user experience for the notification.
Yeah, and I'm hearing, certainly there's a lot of complexity to build, to think about, a lot of the experience, certainly the design. I know there's a really strong design team. When it comes to the end user actually using the app, and this is my perspective, and I'd love to hear yours, it is a real simple way to interact with SharePoint. Sometimes it's the best way to read news. It's a nice thing to do when you've got 5 minutes. Jump in and see what news articles are new and read them. You've stripped out all the complexities of a customer having to build in that responsive design or think about how things are going to reflow or, if they even build a custom web part, how that shows up on the page. But for the user, in all the things that you build, certainly there's the complexity of writing the code and nailing the scenario and whatnot. But how do we think about keeping people productive on the go?
It's actually interesting because when you think about a lot of different apps out there, there's a spectrum of things that they do. They keep people informed, they help them save time, or they are a great place to go and consume stuff. And we really see the SharePoint app as being able to cover a lot of that spectrum. Meaning success for us and for our customers, we believe, is they can come into the app, they can accept a notification, and they have completed that task. They can come into the app, they can do a quick search, they can find the content they want in a rich way. they can consume the content, they completed that task, right? So from that perspective, that end of the spectrum, we want to give them time back and make things a lot easier for them. We also think that on the other end of the spectrum, if they can come into the app, like you said, and read news on the way home on the bus, or find that document that they were just learning about in a meeting they had earlier that day, and they can consume that on the go, that's also success for us. So we want to make your SharePoint world come to you wherever you're at, and all the different tasks, because SharePoint does so many different things, there's a lot of variety in how we can be successful and how we can help the customer be successful in consuming all the things that happen in the SharePoint place.
I think bringing the two together for me too, if I think back over the last couple of years, we very much were in a mode of what API is exposed that we can call from the mobile app to get that data. And I think as Debjani was pointing out, it's really evolved more towards we think about what middle tier services and APIs we need to expose for the mobile app. And so that we can enable the end-to-end scenarios across web and mobile. And that's, I think, a real evolution in how we plan, how we think about, and how we execute on what we're building. And then I think the second thing, building on what Nate said, when we started this, I think we wanted to have sufficiency of what an app called SharePoint would do. And, the SharePoint brand was kind of coming back and, was known but not really established in the mind of end users. So we wanted to deliver something that would be great, be performant, do a few core things really well. And I think over time now what we're really shifting is we think we've kind of accomplished a good baseline. And now we're thinking about what are the core user tasks when I'm out and about and I've got a few minutes and I want to be productive, and how can the app really deliver on those?
And the thing I really love about what you said is the app is for the user. There's the role of the admin to raise awareness of the app, keep productive on the go. Here's a tool that you can use. But if I think about a SharePoint site, you've got a site owner, site administrator, you've got users, viewers, consumers and contributors. But the app is pure user. So it has to be functional for them. And one area that I know you guys spend a lot of time on across a feature, across the app, across, certainly across more than just the app, is the design element. But when you think of SharePoint, the experience from an 82-inch Surface Hub screen down to a 4-inch device, iOS, Android, whatever, just share a little bit more around the design of the app and the experience, and of course, across web and mobile.
So from my perspective, design is, a day-to-day integrated part of everything we do. And we've got a strong design team that's a close partner. The program management team, of which we're all part of, the engineering team and the design team, along with user research, really, we live and breathe every day working together. And then we work closely with the product marketing team as well. But, the design team has been a key part of thinking about the system of SharePoint and how the experiences that we build are purpose-built for the different devices and the different interaction models. But keeping that system really focused on the end user scenarios, focused on working well across the range of places that people can interact with it. And I from my perspective over the last couple of years, that kind of way of working with design has only increased in velocity.
I think you've earned, one of those mantras we put out there when we kind of started this revamp of the SharePoint brand was that it was a beautiful and mobile, intelligent intranet. And that beautiful part, you kind of feel like, boy, we got to earn that one. But it's really true. I think a lot of the work that you've done across sites, the mobile app, is just that. It's I think even better than what customers maybe had done in the past on top of SharePoint, but have it to be an integrated look and feel and have that be consistent, I think is the biggest piece of feedback I've heard, is that when I move from mobile to web and site to site, that it really has a consistent, where the user doesn't feel jarred and being taken out of SharePoint and really just being able to keep productive.
Yeah, we want the visuals to family really well, the interaction to family well. And don't get me wrong, I think we still got a long ways to go, but I really like the way we work. The other big one for us that's always a focus is performance across everything we do, making sure that the app is snappy, the web experience is snappy. The performance is another kind of key element as we look at every feature we do.
And maybe down to a feature level, you mentioned notifications. There's a design philosophy, that is really baked into SharePoint now. And there is a design team that's not just giving you direction. They're actually handing you, bits and pieces to be consistent. Right. What does it mean from a design perspective, how you design the notification experience?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say that I joined this team at a time when we were thinking about the IA change. And I'm very excited about the direction in which the app is going because, as many people say, SharePoint is such a big product and means so much to so many people that to have all of that in an app makes the app not a great user experience.
And just real quickly, IA stands for Information Architecture.
That's right.
And it really translates into how do people navigate to the things that they care about most.
Exactly. And so to try and do all of SharePoint in the app kind of takes away from the app. And so having, these user jobs where we think that the users can really benefit, and then translating that into easily accessible, delightful parts of the app is what will make the SharePoint mobile app most useful to the end user. And you're right, I think we talk directly to people with the app and not with the admins as much, or people, managing SharePoint tenants and stuff. An interesting example was when we were about to release a feature for the app. I think it was the comment notifications we usually post on a forum where we let admins know about what they need to do in order to either enable or disable the feature or anything they need to be aware of. And for the mobile app, there was no direct message for the admin. It was just, this feature is coming and end users are going to have it. So that's just an interesting anecdote. Going back to your question about how do we think about design principles in notifications specifically, I guess, in the app, we want the app to be consistent as well. So in the news tab, we have a way to filter different kinds of news, or will have, I guess, in the future. And we want to carry that over to the notification feed as well, where if you are able to filter on notifications, different types of notifications, which is something we are exploring, it would have to be the same treatment.
Yep. And you're being consistent with how people filter on lists and libraries.
Right.
And, whatever other filtering we offer. That's what I think is the important part about the design, and how you'll figure out what works best within that design principle for notifications.
Right. So notification feeds are really common in consumer products, right? Like many social media apps will have notification feeds. But in enterprise products, which the SharePoint app is a productivity app, I think things need to be similar because users have an expectation from having used other apps, but also different because this is a productivity app. It's not where you're going to just scroll through your notifications for hours on end with no real end goal, right? So one of the things we want to do in the notification feed is to, really make actionable notifications pop. So if this is a notification that's related to something that's blocking someone else or blocking you, have a visual treatment that lets the app user know, hey, this is something I need to do right now.
Well, I'll speak to as an end user. It was a delight to receive my first notification on a comment on a news article, a real one that I had written with hopes that people would read it and provide feedback. And I was one of your early beta testers, so I got to work through some of the fun of new code and new services. It certainly is working now and working nicely. But the first person really, besides our tests that I got, was a notification from your manager, Omar Shaheen. And that was really nice. Not only was I excited that he was reading it engaged, but the prompt of when I saw it, it was kind of an immediate gratification. So you should have called it gratification service. But it really was nice. So the design of it was, you nailed it. Once it got working, certainly it's a real nice advantage to have, especially if I'm either just kind of eager and waiting, what are people thinking? May not be as immediate as, a real public blog post, but internally sharing information and wanting to get feedback. That's a big part of it.
And not to overblow that, but it's an emotional feeling to see that come in and know that it's somebody that you work with closely or who is your boss's boss or up your management chain, and then you get notified that for content you put together, a news post you put together, somebody commented on it. It feels great.
I think you're tearing up a little bit about SharePoint.
A little bit.
I see a little glimmer in your eye. All right, so shift gears just a hair, because the one thing I'm always fascinated just as an onlooker, but from the inside, is how you work with other teams. So we touched on working with other teams within the SharePoint org, or pretty closely related with folks like the Oslo team. But when you start to think about working with the Microsoft Teams team or working with the Outlook team, and what's the experience when you click a SharePoint link, what happens there? I would be interested, and I think our listeners in that context, of how do we think about the app beyond itself in the family of Office?
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to this, really. The first is, as you mentioned, we work with the Teams team closely to make sure that the interactions between Teams and SharePoint, like news, works well with the app on mobile and also well on the web as well, but I'll speak specifically to mobile. We work closely with the OneDrive team, who's kind of our sister team. We're all related, and they share learnings they have. They upsell to the app, meaning they promote the app within the OneDrive app if people are using those types of SharePoint experiences. So like lots of different teams. You mentioned Outlook. But the other aspect to this is not only do we make sure we partner closely to have the interactions between the app be fluid and make sense, we also learn a ton. I work closely with the Outlook team, and they share a lot of their learnings and their findings and their experiment data, and just to help us understand what works well for them. They're a huge app. They have tons of users. So we learn a ton from them. We learn a ton from the OneDrive team. We learn a ton from other teams like Yammer and Teams, and like all these teams that have mobile. We're kind of a big extended mobile family, always trying to get better and always trying to do the right thing for our users based off of experiences we've all had and will share.
And did you come across a lot of similar design principles? And they have a little bit of a different look and feel. Microsoft Teams is a little bit more maroon and purple, and Outlook is a little bit more, different colors and different ways that they obviously promote mail and calendar. But when you think of that design principle and how the SharePoint app plugs in, were you getting a lot of guidance from them?
I think they, especially when we're, Debjani mentioned our information architecture change, which we talked about at the SharePoint conference. We are, as we align more to our user jobs, so a lot of the other teams are doing the same thing. So we learned from Outlook as an example, as they've started to align to user jobs, and theirs are very specific and very clear. Ours are a little bit less so, but we can learn from how they've arranged their tabs as an example, and how they have done their search experience. So we definitely try to align, if at the minimum, from a learnings perspective and just kind of what to do, what not to do. And then from a design perspective, I think it's a little bit similar to how we operate within the SharePoint team, where our number one goal, bar none, is to make the users happy. Like, we have to do right by the users. And then the second close following priority, the second goal is, as Andy mentioned, to make sure we family in a smart way with the rest of SharePoint so it's familiar. Well, the same applies to the larger Microsoft ecosystem as well, as best we can, right? We want to make sure, first and foremost, that our users are getting the right thing, they're getting the right experience, they have the right look and feel. But we also look to these other teams of things they've learned and different ways we can share components or share different ways that we show a search dialogue or a search icon. So those things are constantly happening, and I think over time, people will see us starting to align a bit more and more, but always only where it makes sense for our customers and really does right by them.
I think one example specifically of that is the People Card experience.
That's right. Yeah.
So, within the SharePoint mobile app, we have a rich People Card experience that is actually developed by a partner team, and then they put that same card in Outlook, in the SharePoint mobile app. And then on the web, we try to have a consistent hover experience for the People Card. So whenever you see a person's image, you can rely upon the fact that you're going to get certain data and certain information about that person, ways to contact them, metadata. So I think the People Card is a good example where we did that across teams. We shared learnings on what people would expect out of that card, and then we implemented it on mobile and web with shared technology.
And I'll be really honest, that was another delightful moment where I knew the work that you were doing to bring in that common experience across, for when you find a person, what can you then do? Contact them, review some of the interactions you've had. But when I really saw that was the same experience, or pretty darn close to what I got on the web, which we've been talking about for a little bit, that on hover and go and learn a ton about that person in the context of what you're doing, I think that's huge in the mobile. Because if you think about going off into another browser or app to get that information, that's pretty jarring. And the way that you've integrated that as the experience, if you see somebody, tap in to learn more about them, you're right there in the SharePoint app. When you're done, you're back where you were. that's you should feel really good about that experience. And certainly the consistency of it, I know, is a thing that we get a lot of feedback on. Good that it's the same experience because it is the same data. It is the same person.
And that was a common scenario of wanting to look up a person in my company, maybe the canonical my next meeting or just even know where they are. And so we wanted to have that feel consistent, independent of what apps you're using, but we wanted it, to be a great experience in the SharePoint mobile app. And we were able to have a shared technology and shared component. I think it's helped us.
I sort of think of SharePoint as the thing that holds the whole ecosystem together, hence the intranet. And so to have that in a mobile app means you're sort of in some way or form closely integrated with all the other apps that from the ecosystem that also exist. And for some cases, for complex things, you hand off to those apps. In some cases, you have an experience built in within the SharePoint app itself so that you can do the quick things easily without having to deal with an app handoff.
The other thing I think in that context that you're nailing is each app has to have a very specific use case and scenario. There can be the overlap or the integration, but if it feels like the user has to ask, which app do I use when, which is not an uncommon question. Certainly there's a lot of tech out there and some overlaps. But I also think you've done a really nice job of keeping what is the role of SharePoint in the context of this person's day. They check their email, that's not our job. They go and maybe assign a task to a user, that's Planner. But when it comes to SharePoint and again, back to the user jobs, I think you've done a nice job of making sure that there isn't the overlap, or when there is, it's just the right handoff.
Right.
So, I think pretty important, and at the same time, a really nice user experience. You mentioned a little bit around the SharePoint conference and some of the stuff we just mentioned just a couple days ago, and one of the ones I wanted to drill into was the Find experience. Two things really, as far as questions, just and sort of an audible clarity. What was the change, and maybe the reasoning behind why we made that change?
Sure. So the change was previously we had, and we still, in the app today, we still have this, but we're making this shift right now over time, is we had a separate tab for sites, for people, for links, and then we also have the Me tab, which is still there, and then we had the News tab. And the way that we've shifted the information architecture, the design of the app, is really around those three user jobs, with notifications coming a bit later. So that's still something that we're working on, the notification feed, as Debjani mentioned. But we wanted to bring them together and have one place where you can go and find your content. And find for us means a few things. It means you can browse for the content. So all the familiarity around your sites, your frequent sites, your popular sites, all the familiarity around the links you have, the people that are closest to you, the people that work around you, and then also all your recent files, all of this being a cross-tenant is now in one place. Easily scrollable, fast, performant. Performance is big for us, as Andy mentioned. And then in addition to that, there's also search. So we're investing heavily in the search experience to be able to not only get what we call the zero query. So as you go into the search box, you'll see some instant results there that we think will be valuable to you.
You're becoming a mind reader.
That's right. That's kind of the objective, but in a very SharePoint, keep you productive type of way.
Swami point.
Yeah.
Is the new term for SharePoint.
Exactly. And then as you start typing in that search box, we want to show intelligent results. And then obviously when you click enter or tap enter, you'll get those results back in the results page that are rich, that you can pivot on, that you can see interesting information about. Now, those two things are very important for the Find experience, and we think bringing them together provides a better, faster, more efficient experience. But there's also a third piece there as well, and that is, for now, what we call quick answers or quick access. And that's the ability to not only provide stuff that's important to you in the recent and so on, but also provide and start looking at what we call instant answers, or things that we believe are going to be important to you in getting your job done. Now, in the future, those may be things around your company, like, show me the vacation schedule for my company, or show me where building 36 is, or things that are very important that help you get to the stuff you care about, the get answers part, quickly. So that's kind of the evolution of where we were into the Find tab, and I think our users should expect that will just continue. We'll get more and more intelligent in there. We'll have more information that really gets you answers fast. You can still use search. You can still use browse. Both those will be powerful and great, but getting answers quickly is really becoming kind of the name of the game in a big part for the Find tab.
And in this space, a lot of people often ask a follow-up question, not so much the what's new and what can I do, but they ask, is it real search? And I think behind that question for us now, is it actually really going against the full enterprise search index and the value of the Microsoft graph? I think there's a lot of amazing things you get out of that, most of what you just walked through.
Yep.
But maybe just to pick apart a little bit, like, is it real search? Is it really going against that Microsoft graph that's kind of always evolving for the user?
I would say it's both, right? It goes against the full index of stuff in your corporation, the full search index, and it also uses the graph for a lot of the things that we present. They're both becoming more and more intertwined in a way that gets users, again, the answers that they care about. So I think over the process of us continuing to evolve this experience, you'll see them become more and more closer to one experience that really just, I want an answer. I don't really care how I get it. Just show me what's important to me now, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. So SharePoint conference, just to wrap up a little bit, any things that you were excited to finally be able to share out into the world? We talked about the new IA structure in general, specifically the Find tab. Anything, around notifications or anything that we, talk about with how we're building SharePoint Home? Maybe Andy first, what were you most excited about beyond the Find tab?
There's a couple things. I'm really excited about the investments we're making in news, and that will accrue both to web and mobile. We've obviously started to roll out Hub News, which allows you to roll up content from different sites and has a new layout. We are working on bringing in external news sources into the news system, and I'm really excited about that. It's just a way for authors to bring in content and reach their audience with things they find interesting. And then we pioneered in the mobile app the Save for Later experience, which I think is part of kind of being productive on the go when I want to read content, but I don't necessarily have time to do it. Now you'll be able to collect content on the web and consume it across web and mobile. Mm-hmm. And I think that'll be a great end-to-end scenario that I'm excited to get feedback on.
Yeah, I think the save for later, certainly having that be where I literally am saving it for when I'm mobile later.
Yes, exactly.
That's a really important one. That's great.
So those are a couple.
Awesome. Debjani, anything that, now that it's out, we can talk a little bit about more?
I'm super excited about the direction the app is taking overall. Right now, frankly, to me, it feels like there's too many tabs. It's not clear to me how to do what I can do. There's too much navigation involved to get to my content. Mm-hmm. Where the app is going is makes accessing the content I'm trying to reach super easy without having to go through those few extra steps. Mm-hmm. And intelligence and good UI are two things that are going to enable this. So I'm very excited to see the overall makeover of the app.
That's great, because I always think in terms of things that can save you clicks on the web, saves you taps on the mobile.
Yeah.
So even though I'd love it if we were all good tap dancers, it's nice when you don't have to tap so much to get to what you're trying to get to. Yeah. So for everybody listening, certainly we'll put a link in the show notes that will take you to all the news that was shared just a little bit ago around SharePoint Mobile and, of course, around the whole full breadth of SharePoint. There was a lot that was released and now out there. And love to get your feedback. Certainly click on that, read it, and tell us what you think. But wrapping up, Andy and Debjani, certainly thanks for joining us for this segment. As always, talking with you, I get a better insight into not only what you do, if I ever ask myself, what are those guys doing in Building 34? I now know better, and which is helpful. Hopefully you don't ask that question to me right now. What do you do in Building 1? We can get on to that next episode. But thanks for joining.
Thanks, Mark. This has been great. I really enjoyed it and hope to be back in the future.
Awesome. Well, definitely.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
So if people want to learn more about who is Andy Hayon, how can they follow you, what you do, and where should they plug in if they want to keep track?
Probably the best bet is on Twitter. I'm at Andy Hayon, and mostly I tweet about just things that we're working on and releasing for SharePoint and where they are in terms of deployment. That seems to be something that the community likes, so that's what I focus on.
Awesome. Debjani, any place you want to direct people's attention to know more about you or what you're doing?
I'd say tech community would be where you can go.
So if you have a question for Debjani or just want to dive in a little bit more around mobile, tech community, and certainly you'll engage there.
Right.
Awesome. And Nate, where can people find you? If they don't use the Find tab, where can they find Nate?
Tech community as well is a great place. On Twitter, at Nate_Clinton. I mostly just like Andy's stuff, though. So I guess if you want more engagement, start with Andy, and then you'll see. He posts a question to me every once in a while. And then, LinkedIn and kind of all the normal places.
All right. Well, we'll round these up in the show notes so people can follow you or find you and keep attuned what's going on in SharePoint mobile land. And that's great. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks.
So a pretty obvious app of the week is the SharePoint mobile app itself. It really is the center of gravity of everything we've been talking about, and it really is something that if you've never tried it, we highly encourage to go and install it, tap around, see what you can do, and then, try to do more and obviously provide feedback on it. So first, just the easiest thing to remember, how to get the app. If you go to http://aka.ms/getspmobile, and we'll put that in the show notes so that you can link to it and get the SharePoint mobile app. Since we have Nate here, when people get the SharePoint mobile app and they download and install it, what's that first run experience, and then what really does it open it up for them to be able to do initially?
Yeah, I mean, today the app does a ton of different things. So I think, depending on if you use news, check out the news tab. If you are looking for a site, check out sites. Go find that site, browse it, look at the great way we show the modern responsive experience, and just take a few times to try out different parts of the app, because there's lots of stuff that it does, and really what it does on day one could be different than what you need on day two, and I think it's good at that. And then definitely, as you're using it, you'll get prompted to rate us. So please do. We love the feedback. We're constantly looking at feedback. We want to improve every day. That's our goal. So we want to make this great for you. So play with it. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, I really think it's an easy install. It's easy to figure out in terms of what it enables you to do. And then having it be that both a way to consume actions and activities and information from SharePoint, but I think also most importantly, especially with things like news and maybe even doing things with lists and libraries, is that ability to engage and provide back when you don't feel like you're at your desktop, but it's timely. I need to do something really quickly.
Yeah, and I think, as Andy mentioned earlier, we release very frequently. So continue to download, check for updates. There'll always be new stuff in there. We're always making the app better, whether it be through performance and just making it more stable, or it be new features, or it be customer feedback. That's always a priority for us. So update frequently, and you'll see the app get better and better over time.
So call to action, download, install, update frequently.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have that in the show notes. It's a great app. And if you're using Office 365 or even SharePoint on premises, this app is for you.
Yep.
Another thing that we wanted to call out as an app or best practice is really a new infographic where we get a lot of questions around what can I do with the SharePoint mobile app? What does it afford me to do working with people, working with content, working across my projects? And so we put together a new SharePoint mobile infographic that takes you from top to bottom. It's got a nice scrolling. It's a kind of an easy to access information that really walks you through what are those primary, like you said, user jobs. Sets the context for what you can do with the app. And it's something you can easily share. So I think it's a great resource that is easy read, easy to hand to somebody, and especially if you are an admin or somebody on behalf of a group that's really thinking in terms of how can we maybe use more of Office 365 and what apps maybe we want to prioritize and make sure we have on everybody's phone. Hopefully check out this infographic and it'll give you a real clear understanding of what the app offers, what the experience is that you get, and certainly it's something that we want to make sure it keeps up to date so that people can point to it, sort of like a very dynamic web page that really dives into kind of what the SharePoint mobile app offers. So one last time, download, install, update. The SharePoint mobile app is a really great tool in your toolkit on your mobile device, and makes everything super accessible. People, information, keeps you engaged and active on the go. Time for us to turn to highlight one of our great partners in the SharePoint world. We, of course, have a whole community of great partners. The ecosystem is strong. And we want to focus on this episode talking to the Pate Group. We've got Mark Rackley, who is the Chief Strategy Officer. He's also a Microsoft MVP. And Stephanie Donahue is President of the Pate Group and also a Microsoft MVP. And I always have a really great time chatting with them about what we're doing, getting honest feedback. And in general, it's just really nice to hang out with the both of them. So what they're doing with the Pate Group is really what we want to focus on and hear from them. So first of all, Mark and Stephanie, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
I know that with the Pate Group, you're a set of consultants and probably growing even as we speak that focuses on what you can do for your customers for reporting, governance, building workflow. But I really like the way that you frame how you think about going about what your customers are wanting to do. But let's first start with what actually Pate stands for. Powerful alone, invincible together. What my first question to you all is just to give us some insight into that approach and philosophy and what it means to you.
Well, so besides just being a cheesy acronym, I think it is a really close philosophy for really how we treat both of our employees and our clients. We SharePoint and Office 365 is just such a gigantic beast, and you can never go into any project with just one person, and no matter how good they are, and deliver everything for your client that they really need. So at Pate Group, we have this full team of people who all have their own specialties. We have a trainer on staff, a designer on staff. We have architects and developers. And together as a team, we can really conquer those problems and not just come up with an answer, but come up with the best answer for our clients. We don't just go in there and do projects and then walk away from it. We're very big on building relationships, really getting in there and understanding the clients. So we really want that to be kind of our core values, that together we really are invincible and can do anything.
And Stephanie, on that point, when you come in and you bring a team, you certainly know what the project is asking, and you go through a planning strategy zones times with the customer. How do you loop in the right people from the customer side so that you know that not only do you have the right team for the project you were hired for, but that you can leave behind a lot of training and learning with the customer? How do you do that part, working with the customer?
Yeah, so we send an agenda in advance of any deployment planning day to give them an idea of the types of things we're going to talk about. And that gives them the opportunity to pull in the right people, whether that's maybe someone from marketing and communications or some stakeholders from the business. But what we try to stress with them is that it's not just about IT anymore. This is a space where kind of everyone needs to be involved. Communications will get the word out. It'll help you understand the vision, explain the vision to your end users on what you're trying to do, that you're not just deploying technology for the sake of technology, but this is really a core foundation. SharePoint's the middle of everything that you really want to do in 365 and also in moving to a digital workplace. And that one-stop shop, that one place to go, is just the beginning of that. And so we try to pull in people from all angles so that we have the best understanding of the customer and of their culture, and we can help them with that vision.
I love it. And, to be honest, I think I'm going to take your quote and use that piece over and over again. SharePoint is at the center of everything you do in Office 365. That's perfect. I think that's actually going to be my next marketing campaign. I know the Pate Group is one of your most recent adventures, and you guys coming together and forming this and really not just only forming that philosophy, but acting on it and making customers really happy with the things that you're building. But we really also want to understand where you both came from, your sort of brief history with SharePoint, maybe some other things you've done, and, how you keep that going between you and your team in the busy world of everything that you're doing.
Sure. So my background is I kind of came up through the help desk network admin IT pro side of the house, and I kind of tripped into SharePoint. I think that's how most people end up in SharePoint, right? At the time, I was working for a Microsoft partner. They did Microsoft consulting services, and what I saw as time kind of evolved was this split. And we were seeing very technical implementations from Exchange and Skype. And yet SharePoint kind of had this mix of business and technical, and that was the space I really wanted to head. And I think it was an easy division when I look at that and say, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to work on? And so that's really kind of where the business started, was leaving that consulting company and going out to start something that was kind of different at the time. And so, that was 5 years ago. And now here we are, and SharePoint's even bigger, headed into 365. But all of that core philosophy still very much the same. Let's get in and figure out what the business needs first, and then implement the technology to fit that business need, as opposed to the other way around.
So my background is development. I've been doing it now for well over 20 years, and I had the same SharePoint experience as everybody else. My boss came into my office and said, "Go do SharePoint." And I'm like, "What the heck is SharePoint?" But I did do a lot of development. I did some consulting early on in 2009 in SharePoint. Started speaking, started blogging, and I really found this to be my niche that I really enjoyed. The technology and the community that was built around SharePoint, the way they helped each other. And I actually met Stephanie at a conference in San Francisco about 6 or 7 years ago, I think. And we found out that we did have this very complementary skill set with my development solutions background and her admin business background. So if we meet with the business and talk to them, there's going to be some need for a deep technical discussion, but there's also going to be that need to really understand the business side of the house.
Yeah, and that's where I actually see that invincible together really shining through. You really have a nice rounded look about how to approach something, and then based on what comes, either proactively or reactively, you have a lot of the right know-how, history, and then certainly the ability to say, all right, we're going to figure it out. SharePoint's going to help us, and we're going to go help our customer, and a nice blend of all that together. And I know that you're helping customers, you help the community, you're a big part of the SharePoint community. One of the things that you all do that I think significantly helps, and certainly we always appreciate it just from the context of look at what the community does in a regional perspective, but you guys took it to another level when you went from the SharePoint-alooza in Branson, Missouri, and you converted it the last year or two into the North American Collaboration Summit. I'd love to know more about how that came about, and then just a little bit about what somebody would expect if they were to come next year if you're going. And then one last thing, thank you very much for the hat. Great hat.
Oh, you're welcome.
Great hat.
I'm glad you like it. I knew you were a hat person, so I had to say one.
Yep.
So actually, the conference started off as SharePoint Saturday Ozarks. Back in 2009, I actually put together a small conference in Harrison, Arkansas, which is, if you thought Branson, Missouri is in the middle of nowhere, Harrison, Arkansas is even further away to the middle of nowhere. But I did a couple of years of this SharePoint Saturday, one-day event, and then I thought, well, I want to take this to maybe a place where I can get a few more attendees, but I still want to serve and take it to an underserved market where there's just not a lot of technology conferences. So I moved it to Branson, Missouri, kind of known for the live music scene there as far as like the family shows and like Yakov Smirnoff and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I turned it into a 2-day event. And I also wanted to bring in some live music to play because I thought let's make it a great conference and a great time for people. So taking off kind of the Lollapalooza name, I thought I'd call it SharePoint-alooza. So it was a 2-day event. We had bands play on a big outdoor stage at night. We did that for a couple of years as well. And it was really successful. And then last year, I went to the European Collaboration Summit over in Croatia. And I met with Addis, who's one of the main organizers there. And I thought, you know what, this has the same vibe as what I'm doing in Branson, and I would really like to connect our events. Let's create these as sister events so that we can, really make it bigger. We can have each other's help building it up even more. So we decided to go ahead and make that connection, and I rebranded it as the North American Collaboration Summit. We still did it in Branson, and this year it was a 3-day event. So we did a full day of workshops on the first day, and then we did 2 days of conference sessions on the Friday and Saturday. And again, brought in the live music and had a good time. The thing I think that really differentiates this conference is that it is in an underserved area. It's, there's not a lot of technology in Branson, but people come from St. Louis and Kansas City and Oklahoma and Arkansas, and they really enjoy having that opportunity to come to a location like Branson. And since we do it as a nonprofit, we're not doing it to make money, registration was only like $65. So I had lots of people come up to me and say, wow, we did not have a training budget this year, but when I showed my boss how much this costs, they could not say no to it.
Yeah, and if they were to take a little glance at the speaker list, I mean, that alone, outside of the fun, that it's engaging, it looked like it was a great conference, and I only know that value, boy, I'm surprised that was the cost. That's an amazing value.
I was going to say, and the other thing we did this year was we did it the week before the MVP Summit. So I was able to coax a lot of the guys from Europe to come over. I think we had 17 international MVPs come and speak. So that was a lot of fun to have that kind of brain trust in Branson, Missouri. So it was really fun to show them Branson as well.
Yeah, I noticed that there was a lot of MVP buzz in the MVP Summit, and then it didn't die down. I thought that was the interesting thing. So kudos to you on that. I think one last area, and it's kind of a meta point, because obviously we're recording a podcast. You all have your own podcast called Tech-Splaining Podcast, which I think is a great name. And I was wondering if you could tech-splain it to me. Tell me more about your podcast.
Well, our podcast really kind of started, Mark and I had been kicking around the idea of doing a podcast and really not just talking about the technology, but talking about all the other pieces. I think our last conversation was around change and how difficult change is as it relates to, implementing Office 365 or implementing new technologies. And so we just kind of wanted to talk tech, but also, have a little fun with it and talk about our day-to-day challenges. What came up today? What do we think people would find interesting based on the challenges we've run into with our customers? And Mark and I had already kind of been going that direction. We went to SharePoint Saturday Nashville, and we're talking with Rob Foster and Brett Lonsdale, and they used to do the SharePoint Pod Show. And so they were kind of interested in getting back into it. And we realized that we all had very different backgrounds. And we thought, gosh, this is great material because our conversations, we were learning from each other. And we thought the four of us, Rob is large enterprise and Brett has a product company, and then I, coming from the business side and the admin side, and then Mark with development, and him and I very much in the mid-market, had a really broad spread of opinions and backgrounds and coming at things from very different angles. And all of that put together, we thought we really need to do a podcast together, and that's really where things got started.
I love it. And I would say it goes right back to your core philosophy. The four of you in the podcast are invincible together. Mark and Stephanie, it's always a pleasure to talk to you and really appreciate you being on the podcast. Thank you for your time to share more about the PATE Group, the North American Collaboration Summit. We want to know, how can people learn more about you, the PATE Group, and the Summit? Where would somebody go if you wanted to point people to one or a few places?
Sure. So you can go to our website, which is at pategroup.com. The Collab Summit's website is collabsummit.org. You can also go to techsplaining.net for our podcast. We have Twitter handles for all of those. It is PATE Group for the Twitter handle, NA Collab Summit, and Techsplaining. And then if you do a search for Stephanie Donahue or Mark Rackley, you're going to easily find us on Bing or Google, whatever your search engine of choice is. There's only two Mark Rackleys out there. One of them is a shark videographer and me. So unfortunately, I don't do the shark videography.
Okay, but I could see, we could weave that in where you might be a SharePoint shark or something like that.
That's next on my list.
Well, we'll put that all in the show notes, so people who are interested, I certainly encourage everybody to go check out what you're doing. It's really great stuff. I do want to see if you both will stick around. We have a segment at the end where we do a frequently asked question of the week.
We'd love to.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Mark.
It is time to jump into frequently asked questions. And of course, always the value of the answer of that frequently asked question. First, Debjani, do you have a frequently asked question that you get? And more valuable, what's your answer to it?
So this is not a question that, I get asked from people outside of Microsoft, but we've had a lot of conversation about this internally because we want to do the right thing for the end user. And the topic that we discuss is, hey, we're taking 3 tabs and merging them into a single one, the Find tab. Will this move people's cheese? Is this the right thing to do? And I think the answer to that is a resounding yes. By moving 3 tabs into a single Find tab, we're giving the end user an easy, accessible way to get to the content they're interested in easily through scrolling. So this would be their sites, files, people, links, all on a single page. And it's not moving people's cheese. It's bringing them even closer to it and making it more accessible.
So SharePoint is really a well-aged brie. And if we move a well-aged brie, we are all well-trained to sniff out the good cheese. And I do believe that even as you move things, you're really operationalizing a better user experience because that's the feedback you get. That's what you're building is how can we get people quicker to where they're going. So when you move the brie, don't worry. I think you're as mindful as I think most teams should be of making it a good experience. They will find the cheese.
Good.
So, Nate, moving on maybe for a good wine choice or a wine analogy?
I'm not really sure to do the whole brie. A little stuck on that. But I think one of the big things that we get asked for, and this is both a request and, I think it's a gripe for a lot of folks as well, is how do we think about document libraries in the SharePoint app? And since day one, we have always handed off to the OneDrive app. The OneDrive app, again, is our sister, brother, relative. They do a great job. But really, people expect their SharePoint files to be in the SharePoint app, and which makes sense. So one of the things we're doing right now with the OneDrive team is we're building an experience in the SharePoint app to get you access to all of your document libraries, and we are super excited about that. It's a work in progress, but stay tuned. I think folks are going to be very happy with this functionality finally coming to the SharePoint app. All the goodness still in OneDrive. They're going to help power this, and more details will come over time, I'm sure. But we're very excited, and I think this is going to be a big win for our users first and foremost.
I can guarantee. And if you can't see Andy right now, which I know you can't, he was doing a little dance when you just even mentioned document library.
The doclib dance.
The doclib dance.
Yeah.
I'll have to teach that to me a little bit later. So we've got dancing, we've got brie. Andy, you must get a lot of questions.
I get a few. The most frequently asked question I get is, how do you pronounce your last name?
So first spell it for us.
Haon.
Okay, and before you tell us, you guys know him pretty well, but what's your pronunciation, Nate?
Haon.
Also Haon, and Andy told me it rhymes with crayon.
That's right.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
But it is a French name, so I'll bring it back to French wine. That way, but that is literally the most frequently asked question I've gotten in my life.
Awesome.
Another one I get is, where is this feature in terms of rollout? I happen to have a little Twitter thing that I do because we release frequently a lot of different features. So I get asked a lot, where is this feature in terms of rollout? And I guess I want to just highlight that within the mobile app, with the mobile team, we release updates to the app every couple of weeks. On iOS, it's pretty much every 2 weeks. On Android, it's every 3 weeks. So a lot of the things that folks have heard about today, they'll just be rolling out in the apps. And I encourage everybody to keep getting those updates because we have a lot of goodness that's coming out in the roadmap, and we deliver it frequently and regularly in the app.
So what you're saying is to get the best release notes and notifications in the world, follow at Andy Haon.
Yes. I didn't say.
Can you stand up to that?
I'll do my best. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll put it. Right. We'll have it in the show notes. And if you want all the release notes, follow Andy. But to be very clear, the team does a really nice job of putting all of the release notes, of course, like most apps. But I think you do a nice job of making them short and concise, clear, thorough, and of course, fixes and some performance. Sometimes those also become addressed, and I think you do a nice job with making sure that it's it's clear and timely, and that Andy maybe doesn't always have to tweet. All right, so my FAQ of this week really is not directly related to mobile, but it's related to what you access when you're on mobile, and it's based on content that you put in there. We made a storage announcement where we're giving our customers a lot more storage. So the calculation used to be 1 terabyte plus a half a gig per each user. Now we're doing 1 terabyte plus 10 gigs per each user, which is a 20 times update to how much storage you have available. And certainly it's there to be used when you use it. It doesn't get set aside and become sort of the stale, hard to access amount of storage. It's based on usage. So that's a big turn, when people are storing in a team site, communication sites, obviously doc libraries we've been talking about. From the mobile perspective, obviously being able to access all of that, having all of that content searched and crawled and available through the mobile is really the connection. But to really highlight that we had a common question is, what do I get when I get Office 365? How much storage do I get? And the answer being a really good one now. And really, to be frank, it's been growing almost every 2 years. And if you talk to the team that owns giving a little bit more storage to balance on how much, on our back end, they've done a nice job of keeping ahead of the curve of the actual use. So there's a lot that we offer. And one other last connection here that's a part of the answer is, yes, it applies to Microsoft Teams in terms of the files that you store as a part of a Microsoft Teams file, which is really the document library on the back end. So more storage is good for all. And certainly a common question we get is, how much do I get and what can I store in Office 365?
That's terrific.
Okay, I think it's time for Stephanie's FAQ. Stephanie, what is your most frequently asked question that you've gotten recently, this week or this month? And more importantly, what's your answer?
I actually wrote a blog about this because I got this question so often and I felt that I had to explain it over and over and over. And so I did a blog on modernizing your site architecture because I kept getting questions on, I have SharePoint and I have classic sites and I have modern sites and I have Teams, and what do I do with all of my SharePoint sites? How do I deploy everything now that we have all of these options? And so my blog for that kind of helps explain what that solution is.
How about we give just like a short synopsis of it, and we'll make sure to put a link in for everybody in the show notes so if they want to go read the long form.
So my blog talks you through some of the legacy approaches of SharePoint site architecture, which is very often a sub-site structure in one way or another. And in some occasions, we were using site collections, but generally those were just used to kind of separate and create a security barrier. But we ran into issues with that, roll-ups and things like that were challenging. And so we had a lot of scenarios where our legacy SharePoint sites had these deep site structures, deep folder structures under those site structures, and pretty complicated to manage, both from a security standpoint and from being able to locate something within that site. So what I explain is just how to flatten that site structure and create communication site templates for your publishing sites and using Teams for your collaboration spaces. And that's kind of how you, in general, split between publishing and collaboration. And it's really that simple, but it gives people a good guideline for, how do I split between the two and what do I do?
Well, thank you for the short answer, and we'll make sure to get that link in so that people can go and read a bit more, really to learn how to move from thinking about subsites within a site collection to something more flat with all of the new site types and, of course, hub sites and where those come into play. So thank you, Stephanie. So, Mark, what is your most frequently asked question, and, of course, what is your answer?
So I had a really interesting conversation this week, and it wasn't so much as a question, so much as a policy that one of our clients had in place. And what we were doing is we're rolling out some modern sites for them, and we're using Teams as well. And when I asked for them to give me access to the Teams, the modern Teams site that was created by Teams, they let me know that their policies were that you do not use that modern site that comes with Teams, that what you should do is create your Teams team, and then request another site collection be created and use that for SharePoint, and to avoid using that SharePoint site collection.
Wow.
So I had to let them know that, that site collection that's created with Teams is a modern Teams site with all the bells and whistles of a SharePoint site. And you're really missing out if you're not taking advantage of the features of that SharePoint site. With the recent addition to Teams for adding the SharePoint tabs to Teams, you can really get a great experience by adding your lists and libraries and pages from that SharePoint team directly into a tab within Teams. So
a lot of it was more from an awareness campaign. They thought one way, and certainly the way that it's designed hopefully fits what it is they were looking to do. But certainly there's always a lot of questions on Microsoft Teams and SharePoint team sites, and are they the same or how do I use them? But I think a really important thing is exactly what you emphasized. Yeah, when you create one, you can have or get the other, and it's important because they work well together and give you a lot of additional capabilities that your team members will use. Was that the case in terms of the way that they saw just understanding of how it worked, and then the value certainly that then showcased?
Yeah, they just really didn't understand that it was a full-blown SharePoint modern site underneath the covers. They thought it was a simplified version of SharePoint used for storing files.
All right. Interesting. Well, we'll make sure to round that out and where we can to make sure that's doubly important and awareness so that people know it's real SharePoint. It's just a SharePoint team site that's highly connected to the team's experience. Great questions and statements. Thank you both. There's always a ton of events around SharePoint. If you go to a SharePoint user group, a SharePoint Saturday, some of the larger third-party events like SP TechCon, SP Fest, there's a lot always going on. So certainly encourage you to go, stay plugged in, get trained, ask questions. Anytime you go to any of these events, whether they're big or small, you commonly are going to come across, which is, in my perspective, one of the best communities out there. We certainly just had one of our larger offerings that Microsoft puts on, the SharePoint conference in Vegas, and it was a great event, lots of news and announcements, lots of workshops and training, and certainly if you were there, you got to play and listen to the B-52s, get your rock lobster down, and certainly we're now setting our eye on the prize for the next big event, which is Ignite. Ignite is towards the end of September. It's where all the teams across Microsoft come together to provide really that next wave of innovation with disclosures, but then certainly to focus on training, best practices, bringing in all of the Microsoft MVPs to share their best practices and training. So throughout a lot of episodes, we'll talk about more refinement about what you'll expect at Ignite, but certainly that's the next big target for events. So always a lot to do if you ever want to plug into the SharePoint community. It's there for you in a virtual space for webinars or a lot that's happening in a neighborhood close to you. If you want to learn a little bit more about me, Mark Cashman, you can follow me on Twitter. That's at mcashman with a K, MKASHMAN. And I often write a lot of our news and announcements blogs on the SharePoint community blog. Thank you to our guests, Mark Rackley and Stephanie Donahue of the Pate Group, as well as Andy Hayon and Debjani Mitra from Microsoft from the SharePoint team. Be sure to check out their sites to learn more about their expertise and offerings, all of which can be found in our show notes on the podcast page, https://aka.ms/the-intrazone. Thanks so much for listening. We're your hosts, Mark Cashman and
Nate Clinton.
Nate, any final thoughts?
First, thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
Oh, man.
Great
Pleasure.
experience. I would just say, please download the app, play with it, provide us feedback. Super important to us. We value your feedback. That makes the app get better over time. So download it, play with it, let us know what you think.
Yeah, and as a fly on the wall in Building 34, I see you in all of these reviews, from small features to big focus and what we're going to innovate next. And it's always driven by what are we hearing? Mm-hmm. So kudos to you for staying on top of that and send them feedback. Let them know what you think. This has been the Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet, and we really appreciate you listening to this episode and all future episodes. We always appreciate, if you can, provide us feedback, rate and review the show, subscribe to the show, help us get the word out. We want to make the show as best as we can for you, so please rate and review, get the word out. We're here to listen. And follow us on Facebook at MS SharePoint and on Twitter at SharePoint. Also, we encourage you to send in your comments and questions for our SharePoint team and guests on the show. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for listening. This has been the Intrazone, a show about the SharePoint Intelligent Intranet.
Okay, it's official. We are very much in the final sprint to Election Day. And face it, between debates, polling releases, even court appearances, it can feel exhausting, even impossible to keep up with. I'm Brad Milkey. I'm the host of Start Here, the daily podcast from ABC News. And every morning, my team and I get you caught up on the day's news in a quick, straightforward way that's easy to understand, with just enough context so you can listen, get it, and go on with your day. So, kickstart your morning. Start smart with Start Here and ABC News, because staying informed shouldn't feel overwhelming.